Yo, no disrespect, but those two guys get dog walked by Volkanovski. Now, Patricio Pitbull becomes the first fighter to defeat AJ McKee, who was undefeated going to this fight, and he becomes a 3-time featherweight champion. I believe that's the first featherweight to win the title 3 times in any major organization. So it's a great accomplishment by Patricio Pitbull, and they're going on to say that he's the greatest Bellator fighter of all time. Well, the greatest Bellator fighter of all time, frankly, might not even be top 7 featherweights in the UFC. Accomplishment-wise, he's definitely the greatest Bellator fighter. But in terms of skills, in comparison to a weight class, it's tough to really say. But don't get it mistaken, Patricio Pitbull and AJ McKee are great fighters. They probably belong somewhere in the top 10 in the world. Some could probably even argue top 7. They're very capable, they could be very dangerous, but let's not kid ourselves. Things got exposed in that fight, and they are not on Volkanovski's level. In fact, Volkanovski should not even be mentioned with these guys. Not only him, even Max Holloway's way too much for them. I reckon Kelvin Kattar's way too much. Even Yair Rodriguez, possibly even Brian Ortega, more so his matchup with AJ McKee. Pitbull might give him some issues on the feet and maybe stop some of the takedowns, but then again, Pitbull is a small fighter for that featherweight division. Maybe Ortega could use his size to take him to the ground the way McKee did. If that's the case, that's a different level of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu that AJ McKee did not possess. And you can even go down the list a little bit. I mean, Bryce Mitchell will give him a hard time. Giga Chikadze may give him a hard time until he gasses out, unless he could finish them before that happens, because AJ McKee is extremely wild, leaves himself open, he's so vulnerable, he punches over his knees, he doesn't really move his feet much when he's throwing strikes. He gets pretty sloppy where it looks like he's gassing in the fight, but that's just his form. As for Patricio Pitbull, he's very plotting, short with his punches, some solid defense in order to create his entries. For an example, like he'll block or deflect your punch and use that to step in on you quickly and land like a 1-2 combination. His overhand is probably his best weapon. That's actually what he hurt AJ McKee with in that 3rd round and almost finished him in that round with a guillotine. So we do know Pitbull's extremely dangerous on the feet or on the ground. That's why there are some of the fighters in the UFC that I believe Pitbull could beat, but I believe that Pitbull could possibly be top 7 in the UFC, whereas AJ McKee is probably like top 10. Around Giga Chikadze's and Bryce Mitchell's level, maybe even Edson Barboza if you want to go that low. We kind of know where these guys stand now. And it was a good victory for Patricio Pitbull. I do agree with the decision. I believe he won the 2nd, 3rd, and 5th round. The 1st, 2nd, and 5th round were all very close. I thought he definitely won the 3rd, even though AJ McKee took him down and held control. But then again, Pitbull stunned him with an overhand, got AJ McKee to react instinctively, and then almost got finished with a guillotine. 4th round was definitely for AJ McKee. Every other round was kind of up in the air, but I did think that Pitbull did enough to win the fight. And hopefully, this is very important, hopefully this humbles AJ McKee, because he was overlooking Pitbull. He was talking about making millions of dollars, talking about free agency, talking about fighting Volkanovski, and not only that, he thought he could finish Volkanovski, thinking that he was the greatest fighter in the world, which most do. But in the same motion, he was looking over his opponent. And Volkanovski, who is the greatest featherweight on the planet, he didn't even look over Korean Zombie. He had plans of jumping up to 155. I know he's always had that in his head. Those ideas of his didn't just come out after being Korean Zombie. He most likely was thinking about that before the Zombie fight, but he never overlooked his opponent. That's the difference between these two guys. And we also got to talk about the corners here, because one, Volkanovski has great coaches in his corner, keep it real to him. Whereas AJ McKee had an opposite corner where they were telling them that he was winning the fight. In fact, they were telling him that he was winning every single round into the 5th, which is insane to me. If the round is close, it's probably better to tell them that they're losing, because you don't want them to start coasting in the next round knowing that they lost the previous one. When the round is close, the best advice you want to give your fighter who's in the heat of battle, they can't really dictate if they won a round. It's really hard for them to look at it that outside perspective. Coaches should tell them they're probably losing the round, or forget about the scorecards. You got to be out there and showcase your skills and try to finish this guy. Like for an example, that 3rd round, the only way AJ's corner thought that he won that round is if they don't know the rules. Because according to the judging criteria, yes, AJ McKee took him down, held him down a little bit, landing some good ground and pound shots, but that does not trump Pitbull stunning him with an overhand and then getting him into a deep guillotine that was all the way sunk in. AJ McKee had heart and able to slip out of it, fighting it off. Nothing AJ McKee did in that round came close to what Pitbull did there. Yeah, holding him down, that's not even comparable. They must not have known what the judging rules are. Never tell a fighter that he won a close round and won a round they obviously lost, because AJ McKee was so inactive in this fight. He didn't throw much in there. He threw some good left hands the later the fight went and looked to get a lot more desperate. He looked frustrated out there. He really couldn't land on Pitbull too much. And Pitbull was slamming leg kicks. He was hitting him to the body, which was starting to take effect later in the fight. And then as AJ McKee got a little bit more wild, Pitbull started to land to the head now. And the more fights that happen in the featherweight division across the world, the more it makes Volkanovski look good. The stronger the argument is for Volkanovski being the best featherweight in the world, and nobody's really touching him. I mean, at this point, Holloway seems to be like the only guy right now that can give Volkanovski some issues in the cage. But the further we see Volkanovski fight, it seems the gap between them two is getting bigger. And it wouldn't even surprise me if Volkanovski goes out and fights Holloway and has a more dominant performance. The gist of the story is, they're good fighters. They're definitely like somewhere in the top 10, maybe on the lower end of it, maybe if you believe they're in the middle of it. I believe they're more so around like Giga Shikadze's level, maybe Edson Barboza's or Bryce Mitchell's, especially for AJ McKee. But these guys do not even come close to touching Volkanovski and Holloway and Yair and Kattar, maybe even Ortega and Arnold Allen. Like, these guys are too much for Pitbull and McKee.